Welcome to the 2025 season preview for the Chicago White Sox. My name is Michael here at the Upside Sports Network. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you are new here. We'll keep you guys updated throughout the entirety of the Major League Baseball season. All the latest news, rumors, headlines, what your favorite team's rotation is looking like, their lineup, their bullpen, how their prospects are doing. Basically, any and all things baseball, we will keep you apprised of here at the Upside. So be sure to turn on your notifications. Hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. And for those of you who are limited with the number of alerts that you do get through YouTube, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook at UpsideSN and on Facebook anyway at Upside Sports Network and on Twitter at UpsideSN as well. Appreciate you guys joining us on a Sunday evening. Hopefully you guys are having some fun with your family, some spring training baseball going right now, and finally getting some hockey games this evening. So hopefully you guys are having fun on a great day out there on a Sunday. So without further ado, let's get to the 2025 season preview for the Chicago White Sox. Now, last year, the White Sox could not have had the season go much worse. I mean, pretty much everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The one positive development they had was really Garrett Crochet, who really established himself as an ace-type pitcher early in the season. There was a lot of trade conversation all season long about whether they would trade him, how much they could get in a trade, and then finally, this offseason, they do agree to trade him to the Boston Red Sox. Love the deal for both sides, but even better for the Chicago White Sox because now they have a clear path forward. They have more prospects with which to utilize here, and I like the future that the White Sox now have. Now, sure, they're not going to win many games this year. They're not going to win many games the following year, but they certainly now have a roadmap to success. They brought in a new manager as well. Love the hire. Will Venable, I just hope he gets a chance to be there when they finally start winning games. But 41 wins last year, that's really low, even for a rebuilding team that absolutely bottomed out last year. And they still did that while still having some good pitching performances on their roster, especially in the second half of the year with Garrett Crochet and having Mike Soroka on the team. Both those guys parlayed their year last year, one into a trade to the Boston Red Sox to be one of their aces there. And then Mike Soroka gets a $9 million deal to be a starter for the Washington Nationals. So overall, they did have some bright spots on the year. But again, 41 wins ain't going to get it done. Hopefully they can cut that loss total down to, say, 100 games. That'd still be a 19-game improvement based off of where they were last year. They got some bad injury news to start spring training as well, as Andrew Benintendi is going to miss at least the month of April, which does open the door to other roster transactions for them as well. But appreciate you guys joining us. Rafe, I can tell you review really bad, followed by just bad, followed by okay, promising, followed by okay. Now we got something cooking. I like that one, Rafe. All right, so let's get into what this roster really looks like for the Chicago White Sox. Talkman looks like he's going to be the guy in right field, possibly leading off. Again, this is a team that's going to have a lot of roster changes to it, so don't hold this lineup, hard and fast here. Luis Robert is going to be in center field, batting second as long as he's healthy. There are some believers out there that still think he has a 30 season in him. I will say that his offense, when he is healthy, is pretty good. But the question is, can he stay on the field long enough to be worth the investment that it costs financially? That's part of the reason why he's still a member of the White Sox, because financially, The White Sox are going to have to eat a significant portion of that deal to make it worth another club acquiring him. I know we have a fair number of Astros fans out there that like the idea of bringing in Luis Robert. That ain't going to happen as long as that financial number next to him still is anywhere near the number that it's at right now. They bring in Josh Rojas from the Seattle Mariners, had a good start to the year last year, really struggled down the stretch though. He plugs in as their number 3 hitter in a kind of platoon role. Brandon Drury is in the minors right now, or was at least signed to a minor league deal. With the injury to Andrew Benintendi, you see a couple of names that you might recognize. Drury and Joey Gallo that might actually make this team out of spring training. I actually think that's very likely here. I think the White Sox could use some veterans in this lineup to allow their young guys to stay in the minors, to allow them to grow and not push them up when they're not ready for that yet. There's no reason to push them up if they're not ready. So Andrew Vaughn in the 4-hole at first base, Lennon Sosa as your DH, Joey Gallo out there in left at least until Benintendi is healthy, Miguel Vargas over there at third, Colson Montgomery, one of their top prospects, over there at shortstop. I just hope they're not rushing him. We'll have to see how he performs, but he is certainly their top prospect, at least according to Fangraphs. A couple other publications have him more in the 4-5 range. I just hope they're not pushing him too fast. That's my only worry there. Corey Lee behind the plate, they acquired from Houston in a trade a couple of years ago. They also have a couple of top-end catchers in the minors as well. Edgar Caro and the guy that they just acquired from the Boston Red Sox in Teal are 2 other catchers that they have promise for as well. On the bench, they have Matt Thaiss, Brendan Drury, Austin Slater, Michael Taylor, who had a great year with the Minnesota Twins a year ago. Last year, they weren't so great. I'm excited to see where this team is ultimately going to go from a prospect standpoint more than anything else. This lineup isn't going to do much for you. Maybe Josh Rojas gets back to being what he was in the first half for Seattle. Maybe Joey Gallo has finally figured out how to not strike out quite so much. I mean, even with that prodigious power, say he hits 200, if he can just strike out, I don't know, a tiny bit less, they got a 37% strikeout rate on him according to Fangraphs. Say he knocks that down to, say, even 31%. That'd be worth having a bat like Joey Gallo on the roster, at least as a bench bat once Andrew Benintendi comes back. And speaking of Benintendi, he was one of the worst players in baseball last year. They got absolutely nothing out of him offensively, and now that contract looks like an absolute albatross. So they need to rehab his value a little bit to see if they can trade him in the offseason next year as well. So this is a team that's going to be struggling to get wins. This is going to be a team that's going to have a few veterans to kind of help keep the younger players that they have in the minors to allow them to have some seasoning here. And you got to hope for the best. Welcome in, Brianna. Appreciate you joining us once again. Rafe, excited to hear you talk about their catching prospects. We will do a little bit of that. But as far as the catchers go for the Chicago White Sox here, I just hope, just like with Colson Montgomery, they're not going to rush him. That's the name of the game for me if I'm a White Sox fan. On the starting pitching side, Martin Perez figures to be their number 1. He was signed to a 1-year deal early in free agency, earlier this free agency. I hope he gets to that status once again. I don't think he's going to, but you got to have somebody there who's going to get you some innings. And last year, he certainly did that for the Pittsburgh Pirates in the beginning of the year, and then was traded to the Padres in the second half. Bryce Wilson, another guy who could eat some innings. That's a little bit of a veteran. And then beyond that, you got a couple other guys who have shown promise in the past, but nobody who has big-time MLB experience. Pretty much none of those other starters even have close to half a year experience at the MLB level. Tells you how young this team is really going to go. And yes, every team has a chance to win every time you roll the ball out there. Yes, that is true. But a team that won 41 games is going to be sledding uphill all season long. I still expect them to get above 41 wins. 41, even for a team as poor as this team is at the major league level, is still ridiculously low. Their ability to close out games last year was horrible. Their ability to start games well, horrible. Their ability to hit, horrible. And that's not much different this year. However, I am expecting them to, just by the law of averages, be a little bit better in those situations. Instead of losing, say, 120 games, say you lose, say, 110. That would still be a 10-game improvement off of where they were. This is not a team that's going to be competing for the division. It's not going to be a team that's competing for a wild card, not even this year or next year. It might be 2027 before we're looking at this team as a wild card contender. But this is a team that needs to utilize the time they have right now to get the best draft picks they can, to maximize the veterans that they have on their roster by trading them at the deadline or before the deadline. continuing to build up that prospect pool because they have a really deep prospect system right now that we'll get into here in just a moment. As far as the bullpen, it looks like they're going to go with Anderson, Ellard, Varland, Boozer, Leisure, Gilbert, Murphy, and Smith. Not too many names that I recognize, honestly. A couple of older 31-year-old veterans anyway. Not a whole lot of service time from pretty much any of those guys. Most service time they have is Justin Anderson at 3 years of service time. Nobody making above a .1 WAR out of that bullpen. Now, you're going to have some good performances out of there. It's just, again, the law of averages. Some guys are going to be better than others. Some are really going to struggle. But none of these guys really have the experience at the major league level, and we'll see how they ultimately perform. It's not a whole lot of promise for 2025. I'm not trying to, blow smoke up you and just say, hey, this team is going to, all of a sudden win 65 games and the next year they're going to be competing for the division crown. It ain't happening that fast. This is still going to be a long, drawn-out process for the White Sox. We're still looking 2027 before they really compete for a wild card. It's going to take some time. Welcome in, Jonathan. As far as injured players, nobody that really stands out for me anyway, besides Andrew Benintendi that could come back and make a difference for them. On the minor league side, Omar Narvaez is a catcher that they could go with. And, of course, two catchers, Kyle Teal and Edgar Quiro. We'll get into those here in just a little bit. First baseman, they have Bobby Dahlbeck, who could be a nice piece for them, a 29-year-old guy. Remember, he was once a top prospect for the Boston Red Sox. If they trade away Andrew Vaughn, expect Bobby Dahlbeck to be at the major league level. There is some sentiment that there could be interest in from other clubs in Andrew Vaughn. I would trade him in a heartbeat if I could. Nobody else really popping out so far. Shortstops, Nick Maton is one that does pop out there. Let's see here. In the outfield, Dominic Fletcher, Corey Julks, kind of a speed guy. Other than that, not much. Pitching side of things, let's see here. Jared Schuster, Owen White, Noah Schultz, one of their top prospects. Some decent options that they can go to actually give them some innings. Drew Thorpe as well stands out. On the relief side of things, Brendan Eisert, Mike Clevenger, who could be a reliever or a starting pitcher this year. Sounds like they're going to be using him primarily as a reliever this year. James Karinchak, a former top prospect for the Cleveland Guardians. I believe he was once property of the St. Louis Cardinals as well, if I remember correctly. Let's see here. Not too much as well. Anthony Hopi Tuantoa. I'm not sure I've pronounced that one right, but that's another name I do recognize. So they do have some arms that they could turn to as the year goes along. Not too bad as far as depth in the minors on the pitching side of things. But as far as payroll, this is going to be a team that's not going to be spending much of anything. Last year they were at $150 million. Obviously they're going to cut that number almost in half. As far as guaranteed deals, Andrew Benintendi is the only one making significant money besides Luis Robert. $17 million this, next, and the following year. Robert making $15 million this year, and then club options the following 2 years. So depending on where he ultimately gets traded, which I do think he will be traded, how much money are the White Sox willing to eat to make it worth it? Michael Taylor's had a little bit of injury issues since coming on board with the White Sox. Hopefully they can get him back to the way he was with the Minnesota Twins. And then Slater, another low-cost free agent that they have. Again, a lot of guys that are in arbitration, so they don't have a lot of payroll going out. Right now, their luxury tax payroll sits around $88 million. But you see how much financial flexibility they have, including the money next year and going forward. They really have nothing lined up as far as long-term deals. So I do not expect them to invest in free agency in 26. 27, maybe they add an arm or two. 28, 29, 30, that's when their new window will really open up, especially in that AL Central. Tigers are a good team right now. They're figured to be a good force there in the Central with Jackson Jobe coming up and being MLB ready this season. They're going to be good. Guardians are always good. Twins appear to be just entering their rebuild, retooling phase, or at least should be in the next year. And then you have the Kansas City Royals, who struggled for years to be very productive. Then they go out there and spend like gangbusters a couple of years ago in free agency, spending the second most free agent dollars out of any team outside of Los Angeles. Good on them for noticing a real window of success or a real window of opportunity there in the Central, and the Royals have really jumped on it. I actually have the Royals at the top of the division this year in the AL Central. All right. This is another team that could take on bad contracts. They have the ability to do so. I'm not sure they have the stomach for it, though, so don't expect any huge trades out of this ball club. As far as prospects, this is where it's going to get interesting for the Chicago White Sox. Noah Schultz, their top prospect in the top 20 of baseball. Kyle Teal, part of the return that they got from the Boston Red Sox. Looking at him, former first-round pick a couple of years ago at Boston. Kind of a multi-use type of a player behind the plate. He's not just a one-trick pony. He does have a little bit of a bat. He can be a good defender as well, so I'm really hoping for good things. Looking at what he did the past couple of years, 363 average when he first came into the league, 977 OPS. That's a very good number in 26 games. Last year with two teams, 288 average. That sounds more like a full sample size. Had 112 games with the Boston Red Sox minor league affiliates there, and still had an OPS of 819. With catching numbers down, as far as offense from catchers down across the sport, to have a catcher who can even do this, which is still good, but it's not like 1,000 OPS or anything like that. But to put those numbers up, we're talking about a catcher who could very well be in the top 5, top 10 catchers in the game. If he hits like that at the major league level, they have a real good one on their hands there. As far as when they could expect him at the major league level, I'm not sure. I would say he's 23 years old now. Maybe he gets a call up later in the year, but I think more than likely 2026 will be the year we see Kyle Teal and the other younger players that they have really starting to matriculate up to the major league level. The other catcher that you were talking about there, Rafe, Edgar Quiro. I keep mentioning that they keep trying to bring in catchers and so forth with their trades that they've been making the last few years. And here's one here with formerly of international free agent that was signed with the Los Angeles Angels, has found his way to the Chicago White Sox and is in their top 5 as we enter the 2025 season. Another all-around catcher. Catchers don't really run fast, so don't worry about the 30 grade on his running ability. But as far as the defense, I think he can be a little bit more of an offensive slanted catcher that may end up being moved over to first base if Kyle Teal, tried to combine the two names anyway, but if he really holds on to that position there, then they probably move Quiro over to first base, I would imagine. But I don't think they'll do that until they absolutely know for certain Kyle Teal has established himself at the major league level. So expect them to stay with Quiro at catcher for at least the next 2 years. And then if things work out better for them as they go along, Teal works out at catcher, and they still need a more offensive piece in the lineup, then maybe they move Quiro off that position to get his bat in the lineup a little bit more. But you'd rather have a catcher stay at a catcher as long as he possibly can, so that way you have a good option going forward after that. Max, welcome in. We should sign Verdugo with the Benintendi injury. Would be an upgrade, I will give you that one, but they're not going to do it. And the reason why is because they already have guys on their roster who could fill that role. I'm not saying that Verdugo wouldn't be an upgrade over those guys either. But what I am saying is that they're going to do it on a very low-cost budget here. Yes, Verdugo would love to sign a deal where he can play every day. But once Benintendi gets back, he makes more money. They're going to try to make that contract work. He's going to get the playing time. Verdugo is not. Maybe they move him over to right field and Tauchman goes to the bench. That's a possibility there. But ultimately, I think they're going to stick with the lineup they have right now. I don't think they're going to be going out there and spending free agent dollars. I don't think they need to. I don't think they have the stomach to really add more pieces via free agency. I like the veteran additions that they've made. I think Joey Gallo could have a great chance to make this ball club. Brandon Drury had his ups and downs, mostly downs with the Los Angeles Angels, but could be another nice veteran for them. And Michael Taylor in the outfield, I think, is going to get a fair shake at the opportunities out there as well. So I think their outfield mix is already pretty good. I don't think they're going to do anything to shake that up too much there. Also, we'd be worried about Coulson's back injury. That's also something I'm worried about as well, is just making sure, one, we're not rushing these players. If they are injured, especially if they're a prospect, take your time. There's no reason to push them up to the major leagues if they're not absolutely ready for the opportunities. And we'll have to see what this lineup ultimately looks like throughout the year. But again, because they're not going to win a lot of games, you're going to see a lot of different lineup combinations. You're going to see a lot of movement, both on waivers. You're going to be seeing a lot of small trades. If somebody sees an opportunity to make a trade for an Andrew Vaughn, I'm sure the White Sox would jump at it. If they see an opportunity to trade Josh Rojas and get a prospect back, I'm sure they'll jump at it. Same goes for Tauchman. Same goes for Luis Robert. Pretty much any of these veterans they could possibly move if the price is right. I don't think anybody on this roster currently is untouchable in a trade. So this is going to be a team that makes a lot of transactions this year. It's going to make Jerry Dipoto proud out there in Seattle as far as the number of transactions they're going to make. Expect a very active year from the Chicago White Sox as far as acquisitions. So you'll be hearing pretty much daily different transactions they'll be making, and hopefully they get some great production out of some of the more expensive pieces on their roster because they really need it. This is a team that finished with 41 wins last year. I'm hoping they get up to the 55, 60 win threshold. I think more realistically, we're looking in the low 50s. Alrighty, so we talked a little bit about their prospects anyway. We've talked a little bit about what their lineup, their rotation is going to look like, their payroll. This is a team that's going to finish well below 500. So let's, kind of think about what the wins of this offseason are. One, they didn't take on any bad money contracts. They didn't sign anybody to a free agent deal that's not going to be tradable. They didn't invest in the wrong assets via free agency. However, by the same token, they didn't use their financial flexibility to add other prospects. Buy bad contracts off of other clubs and take a prospect for the trouble of doing so. Now, there's a lot of teams that kind of fit this description, but the Chicago White Sox are a team that really could do it here. I mean, you need some starting pitching. You're going to need some veteran leadership on this team from somewhere. So even if he's an overpaid option, say like a Marcus Stroman type, I keep throwing him out there. There's several others from other clubs as well that you could utilize those pieces. Chris Taylor from the Los Angeles Dodgers. If the Dodgers wanted to save themselves tons of money on the tax, I'm sure you could get a nice prospect out of the Dodgers or for your ability to do so. But this is a team that's not going to win a whole lot of games. I hope, like I said, at the top of the video, I hope for the best for their manager, Will Venable. I think he's a great baseball guy. I just hope they give him a chance to be the manager of this team once those prospects finally make it to the big leagues and they're trying to compete for a wild card, when they're trying to compete for the division crown, rather than just saying, hey, Will Venable, you did a great job, got our, shepherded our team all the way to this point. Now we're going to go with a more proven manager at this point to see if they can push us into the postseason. I hope he doesn't get that run, but it sounds like that could be the way it's going to go. I just hope for the best for him, though. All right. As far as mistakes of the offseason, again, just not taking on bad contracts for the ability of adding some extra prospects here. That's not really a mistake, though. It's more of a missed opportunity more than anything else. As far as holes on this roster, I think they could have used another starting pitcher like a Martin Perez. Low-cost signings that wouldn't jeopardize their future on this team. For instance, there's a couple of guys that are still out there, Kyle Gibson, Lance Lynn, Jose Quintana. I think all of those guys would be nice fits in this rotation because then if those guys have a great first half, you can easily parlay those guys into other assets at the deadline. Now, say, two of those guys end up pitching very well, the other two end up not doing so well. Obviously, you DFA the other two when the time comes, and then the two pieces that are performing well for you, you either A, make the decision to keep them long term, or B, more likely, decide to allow them to leave and trade them away to get some assets for your future. That would have been the kind of the finishing moves I would have done to fill out this roster. As far as trades, it's mainly going to be selling off pieces from this team. So we're looking at the Chicago White Sox. They're going to be trading quite a bit of their talent at some point this year. What else, or what are the pieces that they do have to move? We'll start on the major side of things. We'll look at guys with 1 year left on their deal. We're talking Martin Perez, Michael Taylor, Josh Rojas, players like that. So say Martin Perez, does what he's supposed to do, eats some innings, has a 4.5 ERA, something like that. Teams are going to look at that and say, hey, I want that on my team because I have a rotation that needs some innings out of it. Astros, to me, early in the season are a team that really fits that bill. And if at the trade deadline they haven't gotten the pieces back that they need, I think he'd be a good fit for them. Again, it ain't going to cost you a whole lot. Martin Perez is only a 1 surplus player. We'll go to page 2 here. Say you include a, 19-year-old second base prospect. Voila. Or a 18-year-old third base. Let's do that one instead. Go to the White Sox here. Martin Perez goes the other way. Validate the trade, post it. That would be one way to sell here at the deadline for the Chicago White Sox. Martin Perez goes there, helps out that rotation, gives them some depth. At worst case scenario, he's a long man out of the bullpen if their rotation is healthy at that time. But that would be one way I would like to see them, improve their prospect pool by trading away a veteran guy like this in Martin Perez. And you could do it 3 more times if you had added a guy like Lynn or Gibson or Quintana. I think they could do something very similar here. Now, let's say we go back to the White Sox here. What are some of the other bigger options that they could trade? So again, we're going to go with the White Sox here. We're going to look at their surplus here. We're going to look at the majors side of things. And Luis Robert is the first one that comes to mind here. Remember, he's got the guaranteed deal this year, club options the next 2 years, $17 million valuation right now. Now, the Astros, again, were a team that is looking for outfield help. So we'll go back to the Astros here. What could they give up that would be worth it for the White Sox? So again, we're looking around 15, or around 17, excuse me. So 17, you're looking Jacob Melton, maybe. But I think it'd probably have to be a package headline by Bryce Matthews. I think he's got a really bright future there. And then you're going to go all the way down to the lower levels of the minors here and maybe get an Anderson Brito. Maybe you go and get a Camilo Diaz like we just traded for. A Jakowski could be one. Let's go to page 3 here. Let's go with Cole Hertzler and another Esmil Valencia. Low-cost options there. And literally right on the money as far as value. Now, if you're the Astros, would you give up the future of Bryce Matthews and a couple of very low-level prospects in exchange for Luis Robert? That's a tough one because you're still trying to compete and win this year. The loss of Kyle Tucker in that outfield does hurt, and they do need more production. But the future of Bryce Matthews, I think, is very, very bright. Maybe you would require the White Sox to eat a little bit of that money. Maybe say you eat, $3 million of that deal to make it worth it. Or maybe you trade a bad contract to the White Sox. Let's kind of look at that angle of it first and just see if anything makes sense. Is there a bad contract that would make sense? Altuve, McCullers, Montero. Nobody there really fits the bill of what I'm looking for here. So I think you'd pretty much be stuck with this type of a trade. Let's validate it and post it. So there you go, Astros fans. Willard, I know you're very happy about your Astros, with your fandom and whatnot. This would be a way for you guys to get Luis Robert for the acquisition or for the cost of Bryce Matthews. The question is, would it be worth it to you to bring him in with a shorter-term contract and all the money that's attached to basically give up the future of Matthews to the Chicago White Sox? I would really like that acquisition for the White Sox. Another good player who I think has a bright future. Matthews, I think, could be at the Major League level as soon as the end of this year, maybe beginning of next. He could be a player for the White Sox that quickly. Really like his future. That'd be another trade I would like for the Chicago White Sox. All right. So looking at the 2025 season for the Chicago White Sox, where do I think they'll finish? Again, 41 wins last year. I'm going to go ahead and add about 10 wins to this win total just by the law of averages, and I do like Will Venable taking over as their manager. Does that equate to winning 60 games? I don't think so. I'll go ahead and give them an 11-game upswing with going from last year to this. I'll say they win 52 games. They finished last in the AL Central. They're going to be using primarily their roster as a trading soundboard, if you will. A lot of veterans in the first half, and then they're going to go a lot of young guys in the second half and use it as kind of a development time at the big league level. And I just really hope they give Will Venable a chance to stick around for years to come when this team is finally good again, because it will be very good very quickly once we get to 2027. As far as the White Sox, though, this year, it's going to be a struggle bus. As far as expectations for this roster, maybe get a couple of solid performances. Maybe a Colson Montgomery could be a nice piece for you by the end of the year. Assuming health and all those kind of things work out for you. But the White Sox are a team that's going to lose a lot of games this year. Prepare yourself again for it, White Sox fans. It's going to be a long one. But you're going to have some good veteran performances here and there. And maybe you could trade some of those pieces and get some more future assets for those as well. As far as big trades, obviously they're not going to make anything huge. Biggest trade that they could make is probably Luis Robert. They aren't going to be acquiring talent, that's for sure, especially given their rank in the standings where I expect them to finish. As far as the offseason grade, I'll give them a B+. I really love what they did as far as the Garrett Crochet trade. I thought they should have done more as far as adding some more pieces around the periphery of this team, veterans that they could also trade at the deadline. But the return that they got for Garrett Crochet is why it's a B+. It's not quite an A- for me, but it's darn close. I do think they just left a little bit of meat and a little bit of opportunity on the bone there that they could have really utilized during the season, and they may still will. But for right now, I'm going to say it's going to be a tough couple of years at minimum for the Chicago White Sox. Max, how likely is it we get a new owner in the next 3 years? Good question. I would say the White Sox, they just had, what was his name, Ishbia take over more of a minority stake in the White Sox organization. Reinsdorf, of course, is over 90 years old, basically still going to have full control over the organization. Ishbia was not given any type of control over the club when he got the extra shares in the club. But I will say that a new owner in the next 3 years might be a little ambitious. I'm not hoping for anybody's demise or anything like that, but I do think Reinsdorf and company will still be there in charge over the next 5 years. I think once we get in that 5 to 10 year window, as things or when things will really start to open up there. But I think Ishbia could be the next owner in waiting, and that's why I think he turned down the opportunity to buy the Minnesota Twins and instead upped his share of the Chicago White Sox to kind of be that next owner in waiting. He is a Chicago boy, so I am sure he had some closer ties to the Chicago White Sox organization than the Twins to begin with. But got to hope for the best there if you're a White Sox fan, that ownership continues to be willing to spend. The previous owner has and continues to be willing to spend when they're a good ball club, but maybe the new owner, whoever that might be, will allow them to loosen the purse strings just a little bit more and really allow them to go for it whenever they do have a competitive team. All right. As far as growth and opportunities, they're going to have a lot of opportunities for their young talent to come through this year, and a lot of opportunity in the second half for their starting pitching group to kind of come through and see what they have as well. That bullpen, they're starting off giving all the opportunity in the world to anybody who wants it, who doesn't have a lot of major league experience. And some guys are going to rise to the occasion. Others are going to go the opposite way, and they're going to be optioned out very quickly here. But they're definitely going more of an opportunity bullpen more than anything else and see if they can develop some homegrown talent back there and see what they really have. As far as ceiling for this ball club, I'll say ceiling is like 61 wins. That's a 20-game improvement. How likely is that? Slim, but possible. Floor for this club is, I don't think they're going to struggle as bad as they did last year, even in their worst scenario here. I'll go ahead and say the worst case scenario is still an improvement off of what it was last year. I'll say 43 wins is the floor for this club this year. So again, they're going to finish last in the division. I think this is a team that's going to be trading away a lot of their veteran players on this roster, and the deadline is going to be a very active time for this ball club. It's all about developing the guys in the minors and not rushing them, though, in the first half of the year. Second half, it's going to be about getting players their feet wet at the major league level so that they're ready to go in 26 and ready to help you at that point. Same formula for next year so that they can get ready for 27, and then at that point, they will start investing free agent dollars, not before then. So, all right, appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. For those of you who have your favorite team and wondering if I've done a season preview for you already, we've done all the other teams in baseball with the exception of one. The Texas Rangers will do their season preview at 7 o'clock. Be sure to join us for that live here in about an hour. That promises to be a special one for you guys. Got a lot of intel both at the major league level and minors for the Texas Rangers, so make sure you guys are with us for that one. Appreciate you guys joining us. Thank you guys for all the support, the super chats, interacting. Max, I'm glad we could help you out with your favorite team, with the Chicago White Sox. I hope them for the best for the Chicago White Sox. A lot of former Rangers on that clubhouse, or in that clubhouse anyway. And as you guys know, I do have a fandom for the Texas Rangers and all their former players. I do follow their careers a little bit more than I do some of the other guys that bounce around the league. But we try to cover all 30 teams fairly equally. That's why we decided to do a season preview for every single one of the teams in Major League Baseball and give them their fair shake. Even a team like the Chicago White Sox, who finished with 41 wins, still got their season preview video from us here at the Upside. You ain't going to see it on ESPN. You ain't going to see it on MLB Network. They might do their 30 clubs in 30 days, but they certainly ain't going to be discussing how the rotation is going to be looking in April. They're not going to be talking about their rotation once they get to June. You'll find all that stuff here at the Upside. We try to cover the sport fairly equally as best we possibly can, so be sure to stay up to date on all the latest from any of your favorite teams in Major League Baseball here at the Upside. Follow us on X at Upside Ascend and on Facebook at Upside Sports Network. We'll be live with you guys in about an hour for the Texas Rangers 2025 season preview, our finale in the 2025 season preview series. Starting Monday, we'll get into some fresh content around the sport. We'll talk a little bit about the trade candidates that are still out there. We'll touch on some of the injuries that have already happened in spring training, and we'll look at some opportunities that are starting to be paid attention to anyway by a lot of the teams that are out there. Trade talks are going to percolate as we get closer to the end of spring training, as teams try to figure out who's going to make their roster, who can they decide to trade, and see what assets they can get in return for those guys. Some guys are going to be out of options and ultimately be subjected to the DFA process, and we'll see how many of these players ultimately change teams right before the start of the season on opening day. But really appreciate your support. We'll be back live with you in about an hour. Hit that like button on the video. Hit that subscribe button. Really does help us out a lot. I want to thank you guys for joining us here once again. And again, we'll be back live here in about 1 hour for the 2025 season preview for the Texas Rangers. This has been your Chicago White Sox 2025 season preview. Stay safe out there, everybody.